Every time you fill up your car with fuel, you would expect that you are getting exactly what you paid for, which is clean petrol or diesel. But recent investigations have revealed something far more dangerous and far more common than most drivers think. So then, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about how South African petrol stations bend the rules to make as much profit as possible and how that might be destroying your engine. But before we get into the video, I just want to ask you guys a question. Are you a skilled artisan or service-based business owner sitting at home right now because of a lack of work? Or are you a contractor struggling to find competent, skilled, and committed employees to hire for your business? Well, if you're one of those or you're somewhere in between, today's sponsor JULUKAWORX has the perfect solution for you. JULUKAWORX is an online platform that gives skilled artisans the opportunity to connect with contractors who actually need them. It gives contractors the opportunity to hire people who have been properly vetted and are actually valuable employees. Please go check out julukaworks.co.za and support the people who support the channel. Thank you very much to JULUKAWORX for sponsoring the channel, and back to the video. Like we've said before on the channel, when I stupidly called Socrates Socrates, the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So if we want to understand the malicious tactics used by petrol stations to maximize profits, we must first understand how petrol stations are supposed to operate in this country. So then the first step that is kind of relevant in this video is the transportation of fuel from refineries and fuel depots into petrol stations. Now, there are a whole bunch of steps before this, but if you want to learn about that, we made an entire video, or I made an entire video, I don't have a team, about the cost of fuel in South Africa and all that goes into it, and in that video go into detail about the entire fuel industry. So make sure you watch that so that you're kind of up to speed with everything that we are talking about now. But fuel is transported from depots and fuel refineries into petrol stations using fuel tankers. And when the tanker arrives at a petrol station, the fuel is pumped into an underground storage tank with different compartments for 93 octane petrol, 95 octane petrol, and 50 octane diesel. And these tanks have submersible pumps within them that pumps fuel from them into the nozzles whenever fuel is being put into your tank. And for fuel to go from the underground storage tank into your tank, you can't just pump it directly into your tank. That'd be really dangerous. It has to first go through the petrol pump, and every petrol pump has a flow meter, a pulsar, and a computer within it. The flow meter measures the liters of fuel going from the underground tank into your tank. The pulsar turns that flow data from the flow meter into actual digital data, and the computer uses that digital data to convert the liters pumped into the rands that is going to cost you for those liters. And there are actually strict metrology laws to make sure that everything is as accurate as possible. This includes stuff like pumps needing to be calibrated and verified at least once per year, which is necessary to make sure that no pump violates the Legal Metrology Act 9 of 2014 if it is out of calibration. And during these verification tests, the pump is used to pump 5 liters of liquid into a container, like a measuring instrument specifically designed to be exactly 5 liters, to check whether the pump is pumping exactly 5 liters, no more and no less. If it is out of spec, meaning that if it pumps more or less than 5 liters, then that petrol station is going to be fined because it is outside the bounds of the Metrology Act. So this is how that in terms of liquid content, you actually get exactly what you're paying for in terms of the liters. We'll later see how petrol stations kind of skirt those rules in terms of the actual pumps being as accurate as possible. They can't really get around that. I mean, the fact that these pumps are pumping exactly the amount of liquid that you want doesn't necessarily automatically mean that all of that liquid is the fuel that you want, but we'll get into that a bit later on. But now that we kind of understand how these petrol stations are supposed to work in terms of regulation and how they actually operate, we can now dive into how malicious actors try to bend these rules to make as much profit as possible. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy recently found out that out of a sample size of 1,000 petrol stations, 70 of them were found to have diluted their diesel with paraffin. They're putting paraffin in your diesel. Oh, 70 out of 1,000 of them are, at least. Now, this is because unlike petrol, the price of diesel isn't as regulated, as strictly regulated. The price of petrol is something that is determined on a national level, something that we dived into in that video about fuel prices. So once again, go watch that one if you want all of that context. But diesel isn't as strictly regulated, which creates opportunity between different fuel stations, with them wanting to undercut each other. I mean, at the end of the day, customers are going to go where fuel is cheapest. That's just the reality of it. Now, the reason why it's not regulated like petrol is that diesel is understood to be mostly used for commercial purposes. So the discount on a wholesale level is kind of beneficial to the economy. That's why diesel isn't as strictly regulated. But that creates an opportunity for those of us who are, criminally inclined to make more profits by making sure that they are paying less for diesel by diluting it with petrol. See, diluting means that it's actually less diesel that you are pumping out, which means that if a customer wants 50 liters of diesel, for instance, you're only going to pay for 30 of those liters, and then the rest is kind of all profit. And you're probably thinking, doesn't paraffin also carry its own cost? Well, the truth is that the fuel levy does not apply to paraffin unlike it does to any kind of other petroleum products, which means that it is way cheaper than actual diesel. It means that people don't have to pay as much in tax, which is lower cost, higher profits. I think we can definitely see why it is so profitable to kind of dash the diesel there. If you're a drinker, you'll understand that joke. If you don't get it, forget about it. And for the record, I don't drink anymore. I just know that because I used to heavily. Anyway, moving on. It's so bad, in fact, that according to SARS, some recent investigations found that samples analyzed during those investigations were found to have up to 68% paraffin. You're basically pumping paraffin into your tank at this point. It's not even diesel anymore. That's how bad it is. And Kevin Mileham, the DA Shadow Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, said that according to the research, there could be up to 322 fuel stations in South Africa diluting their diesel with paraffin. But this kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, think about how many liters of diesel are pumped in a day and how many people could potentially be affected by these nefarious actors, these nefarious fuel stations putting paraffin in their tanks. Why have they not been caught yet? Well, that question actually has a multifaceted answer to it. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, as well as our friends over at SARS, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know how much I just loved them. But anyways, they are the bodies responsible for making sure that fuel that is in South Africa complies to fuel standards. And as such, they will have officers that will randomly test fuel from different fuel stations, either on a schedule or from random tip-offs. And during these tests, finding paraffin in diesel is actually relatively easy because all paraffin that is kind of produced or is in circulation in South Africa has a marker in it, an additive in it called Authentics A1, which is a multi-layered kind of security marker made to make paraffin as visible as possible during testing. And it is illegal to, number one, mix marked and unmarked goods, which means mixing something like diesel, which is unmarked, with something that is marked like paraffin is very illegal. And number two, it is very illegal to try and remove or neutralize the marker as well. But as you know, nothing is as persistent as crime in South Africa, so criminal syndicates do have their ways to dupe this system. What they'll do is that they'll put paraffin in their diesel in countries such as Zimbabwe and Mozambique, where the Authentics A1 marker is not required to be added. And then that fuel is, I'm assuming, smuggled into the country and put into our tanks, with us being none the wiser and with regulators being none the wiser as well. Criminals will also use a strong oxidizing agent like chlorine to remove the marker from the paraffin as well. Saying strong oxidizing agent just gives me flashbacks to grade 12 and first year university. Almost just started having a seizure from the pure PTSD. But now that we know how petrol stations are supposed to work and how criminals dupe all these regulations to make as much money as possible, let's actually talk about how this affects you, what these consequences mean for you and your car if you drive a car with a diesel engine. So adding paraffin in diesel actually increases the fuel's viscosity and its lubrication, which means that there is a whole lot more friction involved in moving the diesel from the tank into the engine and generally just using it in the engine as well, which increases wear on parts like your fuel injectors and your fuel pump as well, because they need to work harder to get the diesel moving. I'm sure Diddy must absolutely hate paraffin given its effect on lubricity. You know, sometimes I just wonder how my brain is able to come up with such things. Moving on. Paraffin also has a lower flash point than diesel, which means that it ignites a lot quicker than diesel as well. It doesn't require as high of a temperature or as high as compression, I would assume, to ignite, which isn't that big of a problem, but it does create instability in your engine as well, kind of creating a rough idle because engines are generally designed to run on a specific octane. So if you have the octane of diesel kind of fluctuating because of the addition of paraffin, we can see there how that could lead to your engine running a bit rougher. And a team of mechanical engineers from the University of Pretoria actually found that this contaminated diesel actually has a really bad effect on your injectors, because what it does is that it drastically increases the size of the droplets coming out of the injectors at any given time. And due to these poor spraying patterns, it can create a lot more heat in the combustion chamber, leading to your pistons expanding and potentially seizing, being damaged, or even melting away, as this article says. I don't think it's actually melting away. I think it's your piston seizing to your block, more likely. But yeah, safe to say then that diesel plus paraffin equals engine very bad. So now that you've heard all of the very bad things that paraffin in your diesel can do to your engine, I'm sure you're asking yourself, is there a way I can protect myself from this kind of scam in a way? Well, the simplest solution to this entire thing would be to just make paraffin more expensive so that people are less incentivized to use it as an additive to diesel. So such just needs to let the fuel levy apply to paraffin as well. But the problem is that this is a zero rated essential item. Paraffin is used for everything from cooking to lighting to heating in South Africa, and considering that a majority of the time it is used in low-income households, increasing the price of it could have an adverse effect on its users. So this is not something that is tangible. This is not something that can really be done. So the only real option you have is to kind of try and protect yourself. One thing you can do is use reputable brands, but this is not a guarantee because these are franchises at the end of the day with directors or bosses who are trying to make a profit off of them. So even if it's a reputable brand, they can still use diluted diesel. Even though, yeah, reputable brands, it decreases the likeliness of that happening just because of the petrol or the diesel coming from one place, unlike someone selling diesel out of barrels in their backyard, for example. And if you have been maintaining your car for years and it's been driving fine for years, but all of a sudden it starts having performance issues, make sure that you are kind of check your fuel first, maybe change your petrol station for once and check if another petrol station's diesel is better for your engine. But apart from those, I really don't see a real tangible way to protect yourself from this threat. It is something that is so unassuming, something that is kind of a silent killer in a way. I'll be happy to hear what you guys think in the comment section. Is there a way for you to protect yourself from this from the scam, or are we just kind of screwed there if we drive diesel vehicles? But yeah, thank you very much for watching. We are trying to reach 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so make sure that you click the subscribe button to help us along that journey. And until the next video, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.